Hi, today we are going to do the NIH stroke scale, that is the National Institute of Health stroke scale. Now, if everybody has got their mobiles with them, I hope they have downloaded the NIH stroke scale from the Play Store. So the NIH stroke scale is not a neurological examination. It is a stroke severity scale, and especially which is used for patients when they come in an acute window period for stroke, and patients are likely candidates for thrombolysis. This stroke scale, having said that, this scale should not, each performance is to be recorded for each category and for each subscale examination, and one should not go back and change the scores. The directions for each are defined, and the scores should be reflected what the patient will be doing, and one should not assume that the patient may do this and record the answer. After having recorded the answer, one should not go back, and every question, every instruction of every point should be done very quickly, because time is very important, because the patient is waiting for a thrombolytic therapy, and the patient has to be triaged to the imaging area as well. The patient should never be coached, and repeated questions should not be given, or pantomiming should not be done, especially in certain areas. So now if you have your papers with you, I have my paper and you have your phone with you. So the first one is the level of consciousness which we are seeing. It is graded on the scale of 0 to 3. You need to again use, for the level of consciousness, you need to use a graded response. You should not give a very severe painful response from the very beginning, otherwise the patient is going to be uncooperative for the future examinations. This is a little simple. The patient 0 is a keenly responsive, 1 is not alert, but you can arouse by minor stimulation to obey or answer. 2 is not alert and requires repeated stimulation, that is, he is drowsy and obtunded and he requires a painful stimulation. Third is there are only reflex motor or autonomic effects, which is unresponsive, flaccid, and areflexes. That is the level of consciousness. Now we come to the second two subheadings, the 1B and the 1C. 1C, that is the loss of consciousness questions and the loss of consciousness commands. Now in this, the patient is asked to the loss of consciousness questions. There is no partial credit given. There are two questions one can ask. One can ask what is his age and what is the month. So partial credit means the patient says I am just around between 40 to 50. And that is not agreed upon. He has to tell the correct age, and only the first response is recorded, because the patient, you may give him clues and he may get close to the answer. The second is the patient is asked the month or any other question which you deem fit at that point of time. Now, if the patient is aphasic and is not able to answer to the questions, then he gets mark 1. So in this, the patient not secondary to patient has got some barriers, like the patient has got an endotracheal tube. As soon as the patient has come, he is comatose, or for any other reason, or he's got severe dysarthria and you're just not able to understand what he's answering to you. Then he gets a mark 1. 0 is if both the questions, his age as well as the month, are not, correctly answered. 1, as I said, the patient answers one question, or the patient has got endotracheal tube, or he has got severe dysarthria, or for some reason he is not able to answer because of other mechanical reasons. Then he gets an mark 1. And 2 is the patient answer neither question correctly. So he has got a severe aphasia here. The 1C part of it is loss of consciousness commands are the patient is given commands, asked to open and close the eyes, or the patient is asked to grip and release the non-paretic hand. So close your eyes, open your eyes, catch hold of my fingers, catch hold of my fingers. Now here, if the patient is weak, tired, hypoglycemia is little tired, so even if the patient is attempting to do the command, is well enough, and then an answer of mark of 0 will be given, because he has performed both the tasks correctly. here again the first attempt is only scored. Here you can probably you can pantomime here, so you can coach the patient. You can ask him, so look at my eyes, close your eyes, you can do like that. So here pantomiming is done. So loss of consciousness commands, asking to open and close the eyes, asking him to grip the fingers with the non-paretic hand. An attempt to do is good enough, and it should be the first attempt. First attempt should be properly scored. Now the second part, so the loss of consciousness is done from our side. The second part is best case. So now we know that conjugate gaze palsies are very common in stroke patients. They are, what is conjugate gaze palsy? They are neurological disorders. They affect the ability to move both the eyes in the same direction. That is conjugate gaze, both eyes into the left and the right. In the best case, it is only the, we testing only the horizontal movements, not testing the vertical movements in the NIH stroke scale. So how do you do the horizontal gaze? You ask the patient to follow the finger. So he is able to move from, that's the patient's right, he is able to move to the right and to the left. That means he gets a normal 0. If the patient is aphasic, so he is not able to obey commands, as we have said that the patient LOC commands, patient performs neither task correctly, that is, he has performed 2 in the previous scale, so LOC commands, then how would you go about it? Then you use the tracking movement. So if you are on the patient's right side, you just move from the right side, try to connect to the patient and move from the right side onto the left side and see whether the patient can move his eyes from the right to the left. So you know that he is tracking and he doesn't have a gaze palsy. In unconscious patients, so how do we do about it? We have to do the oculocephalic maneuver. As we know, when the patient is lying down, you need to hold the head and you need to open his upper eyelids and you need to move the head on from left to right side to see whether both the eyes are moving. So here it is very important. We know that gaze palsies are very important. It also helps us to localize in a cortical. Let us say if the patient has got a cortical lesion or got a brainstem lesion. In a brainstem lesion, the patient looks towards the side of the hemiplegic side, and in a cortical lesion, the patient looks towards the side or away from the hemiplegic side. It's easier that way. Brainstem lesion, let us say pontine lesion, he looks towards the side of the hemiplegia. Away from the hemiplegia is cortical lesion. Also helps us to know whether the patient could be having a large vessel occlusive disease. So now we come to the next part, that is the visual. That is, the visual is 3. So visual fields are seen in upper and lower quadrants. The patient is asked to look directly into your eyes. That is a confrontation method. And how you do is that you need to, usually finger counting is the best way to go about it rather than the moving fingers. So you ask him how many fingers, how many fingers, how many fingers, how many fingers, how many fingers. So 4 quadrants are good enough. And counting of the fingers is done. And how do we do it? You are assuming that the examiner has got a normal visual fields and the upper and the lower quadrants, and you need to keep the finger halfway between the patient and the examiner. So this is the way. How many fingers? 1, I see 1, I see 1, I see 1, I see 1. I hope you also see 1. So that is, and the marks are graded as 0, that is, there is no visual loss. Partial hemianopia is usually sector, so like this part is not visualized, this part he is not able to, the visual field is not is impaired in that patient, so you will be able to see the finger here but he will not be. That's partial hemianopia. All the other 3 quadrants are normal, so that's a quadrantinopia. Complete hemianopia, one side he is not able to see at all, and bilateral hemiplania, which we see in patients with occipital stroke, that is cortical blindness. So the next is the facial palsy. So the patient, here also the patient can be asked to pantomime, show me your teeth, show me your teeth. If the patient is aphasic and is not able to understand to your commands, so while you were examining, while you were testing on the loss of consciousness at the initial stage, you should have checked when the patient, the facial asymmetry, how is the facial asymmetry is there or not with the grimacing. So when you have been doing the painful stimulus, whether the patient's face is moving on to one side, so he gets a 0 for a normal symmetrical movements on both the sides. 3 is complete paralysis, how you would see for a patient with the Bell's palsy, in which the upper and the lower eyelids are complete, upper part of the face, that is the eyelid, and the lower part of the face, both are gone. And then there is a partial paralysis and the minor paralysis. One gets a partial minor paralysis where there is a flattened nasolabial fold, asymmetry on there is on smiling, and partial is when there is a complete, there is a near total paralysis of the lower side of the face. So 0 is normal and 3 is complete paralysis. 1 and 2 is minor, only when most of the time visible when the patient is talking or when the patient is grimacing. 2 is partial paralysis or the new total that includes the lower half complete paralysis. Now we come to the arm and the leg, that is the motor movements. So here we have in this each limb is separately tested, and start with the non-paretic limb and then go on to the paretic limb. So here what are we trying to test is the power of the patient. Here we say drift all the time. One should not be confusing the drift with the dip. So if you have asked the patient to keep like this, it is given as drift is seen for the upper limb for 10 seconds and for the lower limb for 5 seconds. That is the patient having kept their hand in this position and then drift. You have to give him a time of 10 seconds. In patients with dip, they will have suddenly like this and they will momentarily take it down and then take it back up. But in a drift, the patient will get the patient have this hand gone down, and it will be remaining there in that particular degree only. So in a normal patient who is not aphasic, you can very well ask them to keep the patient, if it is in a supine position, it holds to the 90 degrees like this, if he is the patient sitting. If he is in a lying down position, to around 45 degrees, he can understand. But if he is in a patient, if as if aphasic, so he is not obeying to your commands, then you need to use some urgency in your voice. And then here is one where we can pantomime. Keep your hands up, lift up your hands, lift up your hands. So you put that urgency in your speech to see that if the patient is able to hold or not. So arm, leg, both sides, first one limb, the other limb, the non-paretic limb, then the paretic limb, 10 seconds for the upper limb, 5 seconds for the lower limb. Is a drift, that is he gets a 1 mark. If it's no drift, he is able to hold it for 10 seconds like this, then he gets a 0, and then 1 is for a drift. Then 2, 3 and 4, that's fine. Some effort against gravity, no effort against gravity, and there is no movement. And if the patient has got an amputation or a joint fusion or whatever reason he is not able to, we are not able to test, then we have to keep it as untestable and we need to write down the reason why we have kept it like that. So that takes care of the motor power. Now we come to the limb ataxia. So here again, if the patient, let us say the patient has, here limb ataxia we are testing for unilateral cerebellar lesion, and this should be tested with an eyes open. And in case we should be very careful. Now we said that the patient's visual fields we had tested, and if the patient has got a hemianopia on this side, you shouldn't be running onto that side and asking him to test, because you're going to waste your time and you're not going to get the best response as well, because he'll not be able to understand what is the command. 2 things are done, that is a finger, nose, finger test, and the heel and the shin. The patient is asked to lift up the opposite leg and placing the heel onto the shin and onto the knee and dragging it across the shin. So both, if the patient ataxia is considered to be absent in the patient who cannot understand or who is completely paralyzed, so we cannot test it. So it is given a 0 point. So because we have not been able to test it. If the patient has a power of 4, so it will look as if the patient has got a finger nose ataxia, but that will be different. That is the weak arm which is not able to perform, but that it is not a characteristic ataxia. The 8th point is the sensory. What are you trying to check in that patient is a sensation to grimacing. You have to do the pinprick on both the sides, and you have to check here you should understand that if you're going to check on the palm, you're going to check on the sole, the patient may be a diabetic and the patient could be having some peripheral neuropathy, so that will not give us right answers. So you need to check it on the arms and not on the hands, and you need to check it on the legs, trunk and the face. And this can be graded as no sensory loss. Severe to total is the patient is just not aware. Even if you are pinching on that side, you're putting the pin, he cannot appreciate. But mild to moderate sensory losses if the patient has less appreciation on that to the affected side. The patient with a brainstem stroke who has a bilateral loss of sensation is graded given a grade of 2. And if the patient does not respond and he is quadriplegic, he is also given a grade of 2. And that is patient who was in a coma, that is 1A, in that 1A item who was in 3, again he gets automatically a grade of 2. Now we next come to the language testing. Now how do we test for the language? Testing of the language is done in 3 parts, that is the naming, the repetition and the comprehension. So while you were doing all the examination, in fact you were testing for the comprehension as well. So you were seeing how the patient's comprehension is, how is he, whether he is understanding his, whether he is replying to your commands and everything. So a part of the examination would well have been gone. So basically naming, repetition and comprehension. There are several tools here which we can use. Then you can have your own cards made out of it. So he's asked to quickly describe what do you see in this picture. One picture can be taken. What do you see in this picture? So he says that I see a lady here, I see a boy there, he's falling out, and is in this. In fact, when you're testing this picture, you can also know whether he has got any visual fields defects. If he has got a hemianopia, he will not be able to see on that side, and he will describe only this part. If he has an extinction also, he will not describe one part, he will be describing only one part. So, and there are certain questions which we can frame in our own vernacular language, and we are asking him to repeat that, and we are asking him to name certain objects. So we can have certain objects which are there. We can ask take a key, we can ask take a pen, we can ask 3-4 items, and we can see whether he is able to. So the picture description, quickly what is he describing, whether he is missing out anything out of that. Asking to name objects, asking to repeat what you are saying, and seeing whether he is able to comprehend whatever you are asking the patient to do. So in this, there is no aphasia, means the patient is able to do all the three cards he has been able to do properly. If he tends to miss 2 or 3 of the naming objects also, probably he should be given a grade 2, that he has got a severe aphasia. If he is not able to do the stepwise comprehension also, he gets a severe aphasia. A mute and a global aphasia is not able to understand at all. Dysarthria, if the patient's, this is best language is best language, and dysarthria is the speech that we are trying to test. Best language will become more of a cortical function. Dysarthria would go more of a subcortical function, also in brainstem lesions. So we can differentiate whether the patient has got a cortical or a subcortical lesion. So you can ask him to read out. You would have anyway, as I said, while you were doing the other testing, you would have already checked out his speech. So he gets a normal with 0. 1, he gets mild to moderate dysarthria. He slurs at some words, or at worst can be understood. We can make out what he is saying. Severe dysarthria, he is so slurred that his words are absolutely unintelligible, and we cannot understand any of his. So if the patient is intubated or has got some other physical barriers for which he is not able to talk, then we should write as untestable. So he is untestable in this patient. Now extinction and inattention is another very important part. That is the last part of the NIH stroke scale. Initially it was called as a neglect. Again, the extinction and neglect, while the examiner is examining the patient, would have found out that he is not visualizing onto the one side. If the patient has got a severe, it could be visual, it could be tactile, it could be spatial or personal inattention. So visual, you would have seen that he is not able to look onto the one, he is not paying attention to one side of this one side. That becomes a visual. If he has got sensory, you test on one side, you test on other side. He says, yes, I can appreciate on left, I can appreciate on right. You test on both sides together, he says that I can appreciate only on one side. So he is not able to appreciate on the left side. So that means that he has got a sensory extinction. So the presence of a visual, spatial or anosognosia may be taken as evidence of abnormality. No abnormality, his visual neglect is not there on either side. Tactile, the sensory I've done, it is not there. Auditory, he is able to appreciate from both the sides. But the second is profound hemi-inattention. He does not recognize his own hands. In fact, some of the patient or non-dominant stroke patients may say that his which is your left side, my left side is this one. So he just neglects on his own body parts, own hands, and orients to only one side of the space. So he just looks at the right side of the space. So NIH stroke scale is very important. So we need to keep grading the scale, and every hourly we need to check the scale. Any 2-point fluctuation in the stroke scale means either the stroke has progressed or the patient has got a new deficit. So it is also important that if you are putting it on the phone, you wouldn't know on which scale, which point his stroke scale has deteriorated. So you need to have a chart with you, and you need to keep ticking, and you need to have at baseline, at 1 hour, at 12 hours, at 24 hours. You need to have a chart line counted at frequent intervals. So minor stroke would be around 1 to 4 of the NIH stroke scale. More than 5 to 15 would be a moderate, and above 16 and 17 would be counted as a moderate to a severe stroke. But then, having said that, if the patient is a professional driver and he has got a visual neglect on one side, he's got a visual field deficit on one side, and he cannot drive his vehicle as for his professional needs, then he has got a severe stroke. And if the patient has got a grip weakness and he is a professional who uses his hands for his computer or for writing, and even if his one limb is paretic and he gets only a NIH stroke scale of 2 for that matter, and he remains in that NIH stroke scale, then it is for that patient the weakness is a disability, and that will determine whether the patient requires a thrombolytic therapy. So a mild or a moderate or a severe stroke has to be individualized. I hope that's okay for now, and we will take it once again with new scales of stroke. Thank you.